And we're live now, according to this. So I have to apologize because right now that other stream is probably still up and people are still sitting over there waiting for me to show up, and I'm not there yet. So I apologize. Having some fun with YouTube this morning. And right now I am, in fact, talking to myself. Hey, we have someone in the room. I feel like my live feeds often become a game of hide and seek. And I apologize. I'm telling you right now, I've done everything within my power to make this stuff happen. Crypto Ace, you are indeed first. So sorry about that, but I had everything set to go. I hit go live, and all that I got was the spinning wheel of death. And after 2 minutes of that, I thought, you know something, I'm just going to restart it, and we restarted it, and here we are. So I apologize for that. I suspect that most people are going to figure out pretty quickly that I'm not checking in over there because I left there. So again, I apologize. But hey, thanks for checking in. Stephen Willis, good day from Australia. PJ Kentucky, hello all. Dean Magnuson, Yellow Grand Forks, North Dakota. And Daniel Hammett, hi from the Williams Bay Police Department. Hey, I'm innocent. I didn't do it. So Brian Jones asks, Steve, can you make me a moderator? To which I always ask, what qualifications do you have to look at someone's comment and put them in a timeout? Because that's what they call it. Hey, JP, thanks for finding me. Yeah, again, technical problems. And I like to think they're not operator error, but they seem to happen to me a lot. I can tell you right now, though, that I went onto YouTube this morning and I said I was going to go live at 1 o'clock, and it did a time shift, and it goes, you're going live at noon. And my computer's got the correct time. Everything around me's got the correct time. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but the notices did go out and say 1 o'clock. So I'm not sure why, but I did a search on Google and it said, hey, YouTube shows the wrong time on my live feeds. And I saw several people asking the question of the Google universe, but nobody responded to it. So I don't know if there's an answer to that or not, but it's one of those things that is just done to confuse us. Dave Beddoes, good morning from White Rock, British Columbia, Canada. And I mentioned in the comments before we got on the air here that there is a town called White Rock, Michigan. It's up in the Thumb, and right off the coast of the Thumb in Lake Huron is a White Rock. And the White Rock's actually a famous landmark going back to the days of the Native Americans, such that in the earliest treaties we signed with them, they would use that as a landmark, and they'd say the portion of land that is, you know, the northeast corner marked by the White Rock. And so it's a well-known landmark. If you drive by there today, as a historical marker, and there's a little sign that says, you know, White Rock for the town, but it's, you know, 20 feet down the road, there's one facing the other direction. So it's almost as bad as a town sign that says, you know, one side and the other that you're coming and going, but there's not much there anymore. But it used to be a very, very important point on the map back in the day. Watching live from Palm Harbor, Florida, Jim Bergen. Yeah, I bet it's warmer down there. It's rainy and 45 here in Michigan. So we have no snow on the grounds. We have not had snow on the ground for a couple of weeks. We did have one snowfall, and the guy who plows my driveway for me had to plow it one time, and that's it. So as of right now, we are having a very, very mellow winter as far as that goes. Hello from Mayville, Wisconsin. Yeah. White Rock will always be a memory for me as a kid. First time I heard someone blasting an anti-Canadian song from some Americans. Okay. Bob Bong, there you are. Hi, Steve. Yeah, I apologize. Something happened. I got the spinning wheel of death as I tried to go live on the other one. So I decided, Andrew Allen, check the time zone settings on your computer. No, they're correct. I'm looking at it right now. It's correct. Everything's correct. It's just that the interface with YouTube somehow is off. And I even went into the YouTube advanced settings to see if there's a thing there where I can choose my preference or something like that. Nothing. So, haven't done that. Downhill for Life says, I'm in shorts in New York City. Not the same. John Hansen by Syracuse. I've got some friends who graduated from Syracuse. It's a decent school, from what I hear. Never been there, but I heard it's nice. Lawrence Taylor, afternoon, Steve. How you doing? Good that you checked in. Bob Bong, of course, checking in from Benton Harbor over there on the Lake Michigan side of the state of Michigan, southwest corner. 303 3035CR, what car are you thinking of buying next year? I've mentioned before, and I'm not going to dwell too much on it right now because I'd rather just do it than talk about it, but I'm hoping to buy a Viper next year. So we'll see. Good morning, Steve, here from California. Where in California? It's a big state, my friend. JJCEO40, do you have a bust of Voltaire in your office like Perry Mason? You know, I don't, and it's now that you reminded me, I forgot about that. It's kind of an unusual thing for a lawyer to have. I know lawyers who often get the scales of justice in their office because the scales of justice somehow look like justice. But I've always equated the scales of justice to be more with the courthouses. In my office, I hate to admit this, for years I had this almost exact setup in my office where I had a credenza. Yeah, I know what that is. A credenza. And across the top, I had all my microphones. But at the time, I only had the two cars. I had the Turbine car and the Daytona. Those are the two cars I had up there. And then I had some framed things in my office that were, you know, about my career. And so whenever somebody would come in my office, they'd often go, oh, what's with the microphones? What's with the cars? It was conversation starter. And it's always fun to break the ice on something other than let's talk about your legal troubles. So there you go. Thomas Cass got the Lemon Law Bible. Thank you from Mass. Yeah, you know, I sent out 100 of those when I hit 100,000 subscribers a couple weeks ago. And they were sent out media mail. And so the good news is that I've only gotten one return to me. One of them came back and said, this address is no good. So I got to go through my files and find the person who wrote to me and find out, because they probably had a typo in their address. I had 2 or 3 that were iffy, where I went to the post office and they typed the information and they go, hey, the zip code is wrong, and they corrected it. But I've only gotten one of them returned. And so, like I said, that was the one that I got to figure out. Jonks Queen, have you ever been to the Pikes Peak Hill Climb? No, I have not. I've seen it on TV. I also saw the Gas Monkey Garage episode where Aaron Kaufman took his Falcon up the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. And it's, you know, it looks like a fascinating event. I've just never been there. So that's another one that I'd like to. So just haven't been there. Bradley Holowinski, hey, from Rock Spring, Georgia. Mountain Man, Maine says hi, Steve. You know, that's cool because right now, I'm pretty certain that we've got people from all 4 corners of the United States. Somebody checked in from Maine, somebody from California, somebody from Florida, Texas, then also British Columbia. I know that's not the United States, but that's the top left corner up there. So it's pretty much everybody. Rita Hanla Matla, Hyvä Suomi. And she's calling out the fact that I've got the Suomi shirt on. For those of you who don't know, in Finland, the Finns call their native country Suomi. Finland is a nickname given to other people. New debate. Any good news from Flint, Michigan? Good news from Flint, Michigan. You know, Flint's getting by. They still got some problems, of course, with the water. They're trying to work that situation out, and it's a struggle because after most of the General Motors presence left, it's tough because the city was so reliant on that tax base. There are still some General Motors plants here, GM Truck and Bus, Flint Engine South, and so on, but nothing like they used to have before the Roger and Me era, if you saw that movie. Mito, Steve, Michigan history question. Why is it called River Raisin instead of the Raisin River? I'm going to guess on that, and I admit I'm making this up, but I think I might be right. I suspect that the river was named during the French presence in early Michigan. So if you come back to Michigan, Michigan became a state in 1837. It was a territory prior to that, and it was fought over by many different groups of people, including the English and the French, and of course the natives who were already here. And so at one point in time, the French explorers came through the area, and I suspect they called it the River Raisin because of their habit of putting the adjectives following the noun, such as Moulin Rouge for red house. And JP, who is in the house, who speaks French, can chime in on this when we feel so inclined. But I suspect that's the case. Most of the rivers in Michigan are like the Rouge River, the Tittabawassee River, the Huron River. But they do, in fact, call it the River Raisin. So I suspect that's it. Never Evil says, hey, 116,000 subscribers. Wow. I remember when we were waiting the 50,000 mark. Yeah, believe it or not, this time last year, I was in the 20s or 30s. I mean, literally. And so there were a couple big jumps in subscribership, which I thought was pretty cool. Believe it or not, for those of you who are interested in this kind of trivia, I actually gained 6,000 subscribers in one day about a month ago. So it's always something that I look at and go, wow, I'm very, very excited and happy that my audience subscribes and follows and supports me the way they do. By the way, someone, and I apologize, I don't think there was a note in the package. I couldn't find one, but someone sent me this. And this, of course, is Lehto's Law on a sign that you might find on a ski hill, such as Mount Bohemia, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Beautiful sign, very, very cool. I have not had the chance to put it up because it requires an odd spacing for some mounting hardware. So for the time being, that's just going behind me. But I will get this stuff straightened out soon. I feel bad. The radio tubes are down there. They're hard to see. The OEDs aren't exactly the way I want them. But one of these days, I'm going to get all this stuff displayed back there properly. But I'm waiting for the bookshelves from my brother, who's still working on them. He's working as fast as he can. So there you go. JP confirms that, yep, that's how it's done. And I suspect that, again, like I said, I'm speculating. I'm fascinated, by the way, by place names, the names of places. So if you're driving around, you look at street names and ask yourself, why is it named that? I mean, some of them are obvious and some of them are not. You know, you drive down a street and it's just, Bob Street. Well, somebody named Bob probably just say, hey, let's name it Bob. But you drive down a street and it's a school street. And you might find there used to be a school on that street. And so those kinds of place names are fun to think about, but even more so are the place names for rivers and spots and towns and so on. And it's, to me, fascinating to understand where these things came from and how they evolved over the years. And I'm going to tell you one really, really quick story, and I may have told it before, and I apologize. I don't think I have on a live feed, though, that in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a place called the Yellow Dog Plains. The Yellow Dog Plains. And no one knows why you'd name a whole area after a yellow dog. And the name goes back so far that it goes back to days of the French and the English contesting the area just on the southern shore of Lake Superior. And one school of thought is that it's possible that the first explorers who came there were possibly English and had named the area St. John because there's a river there, and the river is also called the Yellow Dog River. So it's called the St. John River. When French explorers came and asked the natives, what do the white men call this area, to an Indian who said Saint-Jean, that would sound like Shenjun, which is yellow dog. And it's possible that the Yellow Dog Plains in English is actually a misinterpretation by the French of what the natives were telling them the English had called it. And that explanation actually makes just as much sense as any other. So I am an Empoweredon says yellow dog is a something or other common in the 1800s. I don't recognize that word. So I guess if you could explain that word to me, but I'm wondering if that's what we're talking about earlier, where we say that you take a word and translate it into another language and then retranslate it back and it gets lost in translation. Kind of like in the old days with calculators. If you took a number and, did the square root, and you squared it, and sometimes you get a different number coming back. So there you go. Euphemism, Leo Vittinen. I don't think that's, are you saying a yellow dog is a euphemism for like a coward? That I've heard that also, obviously, but the question is, why would they call the river or the plains a yellow dog? So Mark Ewing, love it when Steve takes us to history class. There you go. By the way, I'm just going to let you know this because I like to tell my followers everything, my subscribers, that I was recently invited to teach. And I mentioned before, I've taught law school and I've taught undergraduate history classes at the University of Detroit. And a friend of mine contacted me about a week ago and said, "Hey, Steve, I have a scheduling conflict." And he teaches at a university in Michigan, in Ypsilanti, and said, "I have a business law class in the upcoming winter semester, starts in January, runs through April. Is there any chance you could teach my my business law class?" And I said, "I'd love to." So starting January 6th or 7th, I'm teaching business law in Ypsilanti to undergraduates, many of whom are taking the class because it's a requirement of the business major. So there you go. So JP says that Shinjun is indeed yellow dog. It's like layering Google Translate 3 or 4 times. Yeah. And I apologize because my pronunciation is not that good. I took about 3 minutes of French in 7th grade and paid attention for about 1.5 of them. So I'm not really good on the French. Stephen Baines, any updates on the commencement speech endeavor? No. I'll make the offer one more time. Okay. I mentioned before that I wanted to get back on the radio and be a disc jockey again. And somebody kindly took me up on the offer. WLLW in Geneva, New York, The Wall, 101.7, where they shut up and rock. And I mentioned that another thing I've always wanted to do, and I'm extending the offer, if somebody else out there is in a position to recommend, hire, whatever you call it, to bring in somebody to be a commencement speaker, high school or better, okay, high school, college, whatever. I assure you, I can come in and give a commencement speech that will be good, moving, empowering, thoughtful, useful, where people are going to say, I like the cut of that man's jib, and what he just had to say was meaningful and deep. I'm glad he spoke here. So I'm looking for somebody who is willing to take a chance and let the guy who's got the YouTube channel, who's an attorney and a writer, come in and give a commencement speech. I don't have to be the main guy. I don't have to be the guy who gives the long talk that really bores people to death. Just a few minutes, because I had the pleasure about 6 months ago of attending a commencement at Michigan State University. And several speakers got up and spoke. And, one of them was the governor of the state of Michigan. Okay. So, obviously that's a big deal. The governor, right? But a few other people spoke, and I thought, I could add something to this conversation. So I'm willing to go any place in North America within reason. And by the way, this is all on my dime. This is not going to cost you a penny. I'm not expecting anyone to pay or to fly me or anything like that. But I'm just saying, I'm making the offer. I'll even wear a suit and a tie. I won't show up in a t-shirt. So we'll see. We'll see if anybody will take me up on that. If not, I understand. My good friend, Karen Dion, I believe that she got asked to speak at a commencement for high school at a school up in an area where she set one of her novels, which is, to me, just an amazing thing. She got to do that. And she said she had a great time with it. So there you go. John Gallagher, what the heck is a Nittany Lion from Penn State? If anyone can tell us, I would love to know, because it's right up there with what's a Hoosier. You got the Hoosiers, and then, of course, you got the Sooners. And I understand that there are some explanations for some of these, but many of these names, you wonder where they came from. And some of them are actually lost in the mists of time. So there you go. Do you prefer your martinis to be shaken, not stirred? Only because I've never had a martini. I would have to have it shaken, not stirred, just because that's what Bond does. Steve, would you speak at a wedding? Tim Sullivan. I'm not licensed to officiate a wedding, but I understand it's not that hard to do. I hadn't really thought about it. I'll have to give that one some more thought. I'm not sure if I want to be a party to that. Mike for OU, car warranty question. How do modifications to a car, like using a forescan tool to change vehicle computer, affect car warranty? Mike, that's an interesting question, because generally speaking, if you buy a product, you're allowed to modify it, but if the modifications affect the product's integrity, they can deny a claim based on that. And I can tell you right now, I've seen people who've had a vehicle and they chipped it, or they did something where they changed the tuning of it to improve the performance or change the performance. And when the vehicle then had problems, the manufacturer said, you know something, if you hadn't done that, this wouldn't have happened. And you might be able to win that argument, but you would have to litigate it. No one wants to do that. So there you go. Carl Lind, Maryland Terrapins. I believe, isn't a terrapin a turtle? I've always suspected that Maryland loves their turtles. You know, who doesn't like turtles? Philip Adams, I took a business law class. I see the results from court cases every time I walk into Walmart. There you go. JP, the Nittany is an eastern mountain lion. The Nittany forename referring to the local Mount Nittany, which overlooks the university. There you go. Yeah, see, there's solutions to all of these things. So, Bob Bong, like Benton Harbor. I know what a harbor is. What the heck is a Benton? Well, I've always suspected that Benton was a person's name. You know, like somebody like Bob Benton lived there and he named it after himself. But you never know. The better ones are like in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, along the northern edge of the Keweenaw Peninsula, down towards the bottom of it. There's a place called Misery Bay. Misery Bay. And you know it got named by somebody who was miserable and suffering a lot of misery. So NPC, I wonder how much money you'd make if you turned on Super Chat. You know, I haven't even looked into that, but I have a hard time selling anything I do. To me, it's I feel kind of like the Grateful Dead when people asked about them not objecting to people bootlegging their concerts, and they're like, hey, look, we perform it. Once we're done with it, you can have it. So, by the way, we've got 317 people in the room right now, so that's not bad. James Morris, Lizard Lick, North Carolina. Yeah, there's always a bunch of goofy names of places like that. I've always liked Frog Station, Wisconsin. I've been there a couple times. Frog Station, Wisconsin. JJ, CEO, do you have Wolverines in your backyard? One of the best myths that people love to say is about how there's no Wolverines in the state of Michigan, and there never were. And of course, that depends on how you look at it, because when Michigan was a territory, there were Wolverines in the Michigan territory. But the Michigan territory at one point in time extended past Minnesota, Wisconsin, and into the Dakotas. And so there were Wolverines in the Michigan territory. So it makes sense to call people from Michigan Wolverines, even though there were never any Wolverines in the state of Michigan. But again, that's a very, very fine distinction I'm making there. But you have to understand these things to really understand how it goes. Possum Trot, Alabama. The better part is, why do they call it a trot? I've never seen a possum move very fast. I will tell you that a run, R-U-N, is the same as a creek. And a lot of places will have, like Mill Creek or Mill Run. And there's actually a river not north of Flint, crosses I-75, and it's called Mill Creek Run or Brent Creek Run. And so it's redundant because creek and a run are the same thing. But words do change over time. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm simply pointing it out. Downhill for life. Steve, do you ski or snowboard? I've never done either, but I've ridden a skateboard quite a bit. And I've heard that snowboarding is not that far from snowboarding, but I just haven't had an opportunity to really. It's one of those things. I've also never gone water skiing, and people go, really? What? I never know. When I was growing up, I never knew anybody who had a boat, and I know people who had boats growing up. They went water skiing, or their friends went water skiing because they had a boat. I just never knew anybody with a water ski boat until I got later. Yeah, JB Well, lots of kills in New York. It's from the days of the New Amsterdam. It's Dutch for creek. Again, yeah, you're right. So fish kill meant fish creek. But if you had a fish kill creek, then it's fish creek creek. And so it becomes redundant. Kind of like a VIN number. There you go. Full today, Leto is finished for Grove. Yes, it is. And there is, and by the way, I'm going to let you know this right now. There is a never-ending debate about the full name Johann Leto, which is my great-grandfather's full last name, Jylhanlehto. And I've had Finns come on and say, Steve, it means a mountain, a rugged mountain. And so you'd have the grove on a rugged mountain. And my father, who's done our genealogy back to like 400 or 500 years ago, says it actually is not true in this sense, because in this situation, he can actually show where the JYLHAN came from, and it actually came from a different thing. But I'm not going to get into it because there's so few Finns in my audience that care, and the ones that are in the audience are so polite they won't argue with me about it. So Sue Huskin says that Burnsville, North Carolina has a possum trot. Is a possum trot a thing? Is it a place? Is it like a trail for them or something, or a place they live? Stephen Van Rocco, who is your favorite Finnish hockey player? There are so many. I'm drawing a blank, but there's a couple goalies in particular that are good. And by the way, for the 3 people in the audience who actually will follow up on something like this, Google Finnish hockey player coach. And there's a story, and I think it's in Atlantic Monthly, or I forgot what journal, but it's in a major magazine, but not a sporting magazine. And it's simply about how there is a guy in Finland who's coached more NHL goalies than is mathematically possible. And so the conclusion you draw is that this one guy in particular is just really, really good at coaching goalies to become that good. And so Finland has become known as not just providing hockey players to the NHL, but some of the best goalies in the world. And so this journalist went to Finland to interview the guy, and it's an amazing story. And I actually have had people tell me that I talked about this who aren't hockey fans go, that's an amazing story, because it's just fascinating to think about that, every sport's got its skill sets and so on. And there are, like, for instance, schools, colleges that turn out good players for football or good players for basketball or whatever. But the fact that this one guy in this obscure country, and I'm not meaning to insult Finland by saying obscure, but Finland is a population, I think, of like 8 or 9 million. And for them to crank out so many good goalies for the NHL is just a mathematical absurdity. And the fact that it's all being done by one guy makes it even crazier. So it's a cool story. If you get a chance, look that up. Jari Kurri of the Edmonton Oilers. I remember him. He played with Wayne Gretzky, of course. Idiotville, Oregon. Is there really a place called that, or is that just Michael Bacon? The talk of hockey reminds me of the Warren Zevon tune, Hit Somebody, the hockey song. I've never heard it, I have to admit. Tony has 5 million in Finland. I thought it was a little bit more than that, but I could be wrong. What's your favorite third world country? Broke bloke. I've never stopped to think about it. I've not traveled much in the third world, and I hate to judge countries that I have never been to. So, I can't weigh in on that. Maybe I'll think about that for a week and get back to you. Donald Norby, what else is there to do in Finland? I can tell you right now that Finland, being so far north, has got beautiful, long summer days. In the winter, you pretty much have got to, deal with the cold and the snow. But Finland is known for a variety of things, including their per capita consumption of coffee and alcohol, both for obvious reasons. And they also, of course, are the inventors of and perfecters of the sauna, which is pronounced sauna, not sauna. And so what you do up there, I guess, is if it gets too cold out, you jump in the sauna, drink some good Finlandia. That'd be vodka, my friends. And then to cool off, you go jump in a snowbank or a nearby lake. So there you go. 5.5 mil, according to Wikipedia. I believe it. I don't know why I had the number 7 stuck in my head, and I was just adjusting for inflation. But 5.5 million. So there you go. Chris Woodhouse, my favorite town name is Flippin, Arkansas. Is there a really place called Flippin, Arkansas? Like frickin' Arkansas, There you go. Chevy Mustang, raise reindeer. Oh, yeah, and lots of lakes. Chasman, yeah. Finland has got a lot of lakes, a lot of reindeer, especially up north. They do have wife-carrying contests, Anti-Anonymous points out. And I also know that they, I believe, at one point in time had a contest for throwing cell phones. They had a cell phone throwing competition also. So the Finns have got a good sense of humor about a lot of stuff. So Jim Bergen, chess or checkers? And if a move in chess is a gambit, what is it called in checkers? Well, the thing about chess or checkers, I'm a chess fan myself. I mean, I know how to play checkers, but I don't really care for it. It's kind of boring to me. But I'm not sure that checkers has that much of a gambit in it, because you can force a person to jump, for instance. So I mean, but yeah, it's interesting how chess has got a whole language unto itself. Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, JJCEO 40 points out. Yeah, that was actually, I believe, renamed because Truth or Consequences, a TV show, which I never quite understood, had a contest and said, would somebody out there want to rename their town for us, and they'll get some free publicity. And the publicity is probably worth cash value about $13, and they're still named that. So there you go. Warp Factor 999 says Finland was the only country dumb enough to pay their World War II debts. That's actually true, or World War I debts. But the thing about that is that Finland is also a country that actually thinks like, hey, we're honorable people. We pay our debts. And there was a time when people assumed you'd actually pay your debts. That's what you thought it meant. So there you go. Rita Hanala Matala won gold in 2019 in ice hockey. Sorry, Canada. Yeah, whenever there's hockey on TV, the international stuff, juniors or men's or women's, I watch it, and I'll admit I root for the Finns. And then if they're playing the U.S., I kind of just pretend I'm not rooting for either side and to see who wins. People often forget that during the Miracle on Ice run in the Olympics at Lake Placid, the Americans beat the Russians, but we actually had to then beat the Finns for the gold medal, because of the way they did the rounds and all that stuff back then. But the big game was U.S. Russia, but it was not the final game of the series. So people forget this stuff. Andrew Allen, have you seen the movie Flash of Genius about Robert Kearns? I was wondering how accurate it is. It was actually pretty accurate. That's the movie. Greg Kinnear stars as the guy who invented the intermittent windshield wiper. He patented it, and then he took it to a couple car companies and said, do you want to buy this from me? And they all said no, and they just started using it anyways. And so he sued them, and I believe he sued Ford first, and he wound up having to represent himself because the litigation was so expensive. I believe he won the first lawsuit, but then he lost a later lawsuit. But his life's work basically was he had an invention and then spent decades litigating over whether or not he should get paid for it. Very, very sad situation. The car company should have just licensed it from him and called it a day, but for whatever reason, they didn't. But there you go. Chazman says Mobile, Alabama is pronounced Mobile. A lot of people say mobile or mobile. Yeah, Mobile. There's a lot of town names that are like that. Is it, Lima, Peru, but I think it's Lima, Ohio. I could be wrong. There's a Charlotte, Michigan, and a Charlotte, North Carolina. There you go. So, which Finn is your favorite Formula One driver? Peter Brazier. I'd have to double check. But there's a couple of Finnish drivers. But a couple of years ago, there was a famous exchange that made its way onto YouTube. And if somebody could look this up and find it for me, I'd be deeply indebted to you. Where a Formula One pit crew guy was giving instructions to the Finnish driver who was winning the race. And at one point he goes, "Shut up, I know what I'm doing." Donald Norby, was that Kimi? Kimi Räikkönen? I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me. But the Finns are known as being, and by the way, when you categorize an entire group of people and say, that the stereotype of these people is such and such, it's often the situation where you go, that's, you can't label a whole group of people to be like that. But the Finns will tell you that there are things about the Finns that are generally true. And so Finns, if you as an American go to Finland, you'll discover things about Finns that, for instance, they don't make small talk. You don't walk up to a stranger at a bus station and go, "Hey, how you doing? What do you do for a living? Hey, nice coat. Where'd you get it? What do those shoes cost you?" They don't do that. They don't do that in Finland. So Finns are known to be a little more reserved, a little quieter, maybe even introverted. As a people, they really, really enjoy their personal space. So that if somebody's standing here and you walk over, you don't stand up against them, you stand over here, and that's just how it is. And so a lot of people I know who've gone to Finland have said, no, Steve, this is universal. This is absolutely true in all of Finland. And I've spoken to Finns, people from Finland, people who are Finnish here, go there to visit and come back. And they say, absolutely, these things are true. So the idea that a Finnish Formula One driver would tell somebody, shut up, I know what I'm doing, is even funnier because he's Finnish. And number two, he obviously did it because he's winning. He knew what he's doing. So I suspect that the guy who was talking to him over the radio was not Finnish, which makes it even funnier on several levels. So there you go. We got a slap out in Oklahoma. There you go. Michigan City, Indiana. Matthias Krigsman, I'm a Finn, and I can confirm that. Thank you. And I apologize for mispronouncing the name, although Matthias sounds Finnish, but Krigsman does not, so I'm not sure. My first name, Steve, of course, is not Finnish. I believe in Finnish it would be Tapani, but last name, Lehto, L-E-H-T-O, is actually pronounced Lehto, but I don't say it right. I admit that, so there you go. When is the Michigan expungement law going to change? 5153 Flash. I'm not that sure. I did a video not too long ago about expungements, but I'm not sure if the laws are going to change anytime soon. So I'm not really sure. I've not been following it at all. Haven't heard about it. Kimi Räikkönen owns a karaoke in Helsinki. People visit it, but do they get up and sing? I'd be curious about that. Rita Matala points this out. And of course, Rita Matala, those are both great Finnish names, besides the fact that she's got two I's in her own, her first name, which we don't do in English very often. R-I-I-T-A, Rita Matala. They also roll their R's. And don't forget, there was the famous Finnish ski jumper, Matti Nukkinen. Again, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I'm close. But Matti Nukkinen was the guy who invented the style of skiing where you put your skis out and then you get in there like that. And when he developed that style, it set a bunch of records and really extended the length of time these guys are staying in the air. And then sadly, his life spun wildly out of control. He won a bunch of gold medals in both Olympics and in just the world ski jumping championships. And I believe he may have had some problems with alcohol, public drunkenness kind of things, and kind of an embarrassing life. And then he may have even passed away by now, but a very, very sad story. Yes, but well, Steve Stalox is the Flying Finn, but you have to understand that the Flying Finn was a name that they gave him, but he was not the first Flying Finn. Of course, Paavo Nurmi was the Flying Finn who was famous around the World War I, World War II, prior to World War II, but post World War I Olympic era. And maybe even a little bit before, like 1912, that era. But Paavo Nurmi was an amazing track and field athlete, running distances as long as the marathon and back, and just an amazing guy. And there's a famous photograph of him running a race, and he's carrying a stopwatch because, among other things, he wasn't trusting the guys at the finish line to get the stopwatch correctly. And most distance runners will tell you don't carry extraneous stuff. But to him, it was that important that he'd actually carry the stopwatch. So there you go. Tony S. may have had some problems with alcohol. Yeah, I was going to say the euphemism may have had some issues with alcohol, but I went with problems. There you go. Full today, not enough alcohol can be a problem. Yeah, it depends on how you look at it, Glass is half empty, glass is half full. Mutty was always drunk, Tony S. Chasman, I've seen a couple of good Finnish war movies, almost as good as Korean war movies. Yeah, there's a couple, and I'm drawing a mental blank on them. I've seen some dramatizations that were shot in Finnish, the actual drama films, and some good documentaries like Fire and Ice is a documentary about the Finnish battles against the Russians in World War II, which is quite a big thing for them. JJ Leto, Formula One driver. Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I first started out doing stuff on the internet, if you Googled Leto, you'd get a lot of JJ Leto stuff too, but not so much anymore. Have you seen the 1976 Gumball Rally? You mean the movie Gumball Rally? Yeah, I have. It's been a while, but I've seen that, yeah. Michael Hagberg was a skier from the Agony of Defeat Wide World of Sports finish. No, I believe he's Czechoslovakian. I could be wrong about that, but I think he was Czech. And the funny thing about that is that guy survived that crash, but he became world famous because of the Agony of Defeat. And for years in the opening sequence of the Wide World of Sports, they would have that narrator saying, covering the world of sports, from the thrill of victory to the agony of defeat. And they changed what the thrill of victory was. The thrill of victory could have been like the U.S. Olympic hockey team throwing their gloves up in the air, or it could have been Mary Lou Retton scoring a perfect 10 at the 84 Olympics, as if that mattered. But they kept the agony of defeat for many, many years because it was you couldn't get a better representation of an athletic train wreck than that guy going down the ski ramp and then just wildly out of control. And I believe he got injured, but not even that badly. And I remember reading an interview with him later where he said, I'm famous and everyone just assumes I'm dead. Brian Jones says Vinko Bogataj was Slovenian. There you go. So I knew it was someplace over in that region. So, and then Charles Lalonde says agony defeat was Yugoslavian. Yeah, and again, I apologize because I know that region, Slovenia, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, there's a bunch of areas over there. They've changed names a bunch of times. It might depend on what language you speak as to how you identify yourself, and also what country you are from. If he was competing in an event for a country, and I'm not going to go there. But yeah. So he's he became famous for crashing. He survived, and everyone, like I said, always assumed he was dead. Ernest Prince, how long were you in radio? I did some years with WKMY, WKOY, Princeton. Is it West Virginia? I worked in radio starting in 1982 in Bad Axe. Worked in Saginaw at WKNX for a couple of years. Worked in Flint at WTRX and CK105. And I left radio in 1989 when I went to law school. So that was about 8 years in the 1980s. And then when I got out of law school and I came back to Michigan, I did some talk shows in Flint, WFDF, in Detroit at WOW FM, WOWF FM, and then a couple other stations as well. But that was starting in the 1990s up until fairly recently. I was even doing talk shows not that long ago. And then I when I left radio the last time, I started doing podcasts because I wanted to play with microphones. So here we are. But I was working as a DJ, anything like WKRP, JJCEO 40. The interesting thing is they actually did try a little bit to make WKRP look realistic. It actually has a studio and it appears like you're doing stuff in there. But the station made no sense as to like what their format was, why they had different disc jockeys of totally different formats working there. But I mean, it worked great as a comedy. It would not have worked as well as a radio station if they did that in real life. 2000 Murr, tow truck stories. I've gotten 2 or 3 videos of just nothing but tow truck stories. I've given you all the good ones. If I think of any more, I'll throw them in there, but I don't really have that many right now. 5153 Flash. How often do you go metal detecting nowadays? And he references my belt buckle story, which is a story I told for the video about the 100,000 subscribers. In Michigan, you cannot metal detect in the winter or when the ground is frozen. So I can only detect here basically from April till about October. I didn't get out that many times this past year, maybe half a dozen possibly. But I will keep my metal detector in my my older Ford Explorer and with my equipment in there. And if I'm driving around and I've got a few minutes and I spot a good spot, I'll stop and really, really quickly check it. So I can tell you that this past summer, I found a solid silver quarter from the 1930s. And it was a spot. I was driving by, saw it, jumped out, detected for like 15 minutes, found it, and got back in my car and left. And that's an unusual find these days. But to find one in such a small period of time, and it was so unexpected that, it's one of those things. So somebody asked also about what kind of detectors, Dave Horlocker, V3i or DFX. I've had both. The V3i is a step above the DFX, but they're both very, very good detectors. If you've got the money, get a V3i. If you're new to detecting, you might want to get the DFX. It's less expensive and it's easier to learn. But quite frankly, they're both good. Steve Higgs, how old are you? How old do I look? It's kind of funny because I think I get people guessing my age every which way. But I've mentioned before that I graduated high school in 1980, 1980. So you can figure that out on your own. So there you go. Ever meet DJ and MASH writer Ken Levine, Bob Summers? No, I've heard of him, but I think he's in California, isn't he? So have not met him. JJCEO says there's a funny British series called The Detectorists with 3 seasons, and I've seen that, and it is very good. It's a show shot in England about a group of detectorists in small town England going around looking for stuff in England. And, it's a typical show that they've got personalities and storylines and stuff. But one of the major things of the story is what these guys all have in common is they go detecting together. And the stories come out of detecting that these guys have in the show are very, very realistic. And the personalities are just like guys I know who detect. And there's not everyone goes metal detecting. It's like guys who go fishing or hunting or whatever, four-wheeling, whatever. And so each community is going to have its own group of people who've got certain personality types. And so the Detectorists does a very, very good job of showing you what types of guys go detecting, and then the fact they have lives also. So it's an interesting story. I salute them for having made it. And I'm not sure how widely available it is here in America. I've seen it on the cable channels. I'm not sure if it's the BBC America channel or some other channel, but I've watched it and I actually do enjoy it a lot. So there you go. H.W. Wells, tell folks you're a 72. And they'll tell you how great you look. There you go. The funny thing is that I'm going to do a video one of these days simply about my hair. And I think we've gone about as far as we can go here because someone the other day referred to me as a redhead. And now I'm not quite sure why they said that, because they said it like it was an insult. And I don't know that calling somebody a redhead or a blonde or a brunette would be an insult in and of itself. I don't get that. But the fact that somebody actually says, well, he's a redhead, which makes him stupid. But I've been told I've got blonde hair, now red hair. I've been told I bleach my hair. I've been told that I've got a toupee. And I actually had somebody recently say, but you did have that surgery. And I go, what surgery? And they said, well, the surgery to fix your hairline. And I go, when was my hairline broken? What are you talking about? And they said, well, your hairline's been moved, right? I mean, no, my hairline's, it's moved backwards a little bit, but not much, but I've never moved it forward. What? I shoot 2 videos a day. When did I have time to actually have surgery and recover from it and never have anybody see it? I mean, doesn't it take weeks to recover from surgery that could like put a big old zipper scar across your forehead? So I'm not sure if anybody else out there is entertained by this as I am, but trust me. I mean, I'd lean in closer, but I don't want to scare you. But that's my real hair. Okay, that's my hair. I'm not bragging about it. I'm just saying that's what it is. There you go. JJCEO, Rogaine can work wonders. Matthias, the magic of modern medicine. There you go. Brian Jones, gingers have no soul. Well, but then again, I mean, we've talked about this before. I'm not going to go off on the tangent thing, but there's Marianne and there's Ginger. And although most guys will tell you that Marianne is hotter, Ginger was not bad, so redheads have got their thing. As Arizona Mika 85, when did the hair thing start? Believe it or not, almost immediately after shooting videos. And it's just one of those things. I don't know. I've spoken before about how I delete comments from my videos when they're insulting or obscene or vile or threatening. And so I've had people post stuff, and so I was kind of surprised, but you can post a video about anything and people will say, oh, this guy's an idiot. This guy's stupid. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a moron. I've got people who tell me I talk too fast. I've had people tell me I talk too slow. I've had people, say all kinds of stuff. I've had people say that my teeth are fake. I've got dentures. So I never anticipated the number of crazy things that would be leveled at me, but the number of them that involve my hair just surprised me because I never would have expected that to be the focus of what's wrong with Steve. So there you go. True redheads can be wild lovers. Ernest Prince. You sound like you know something. Tryfingers. Redheads can have a temper. Ask my mom. Is she a redhead or does she know one? Daya Draper, I think you're great. Well, thank you. Jim Adams. Aren't most things dug from the ground in very poor condition? You'd think so, but no. And I'm glad you asked that. I think you may have asked it more than once, and I apologize. I saw it earlier, but I was talking. Some coins survive very, very well in the ground. Silver, for instance, you can pop a coin out of the ground that's a silver coin, like a pre-1964 or older American coin, and they're shiny, like the day they were dropped. Pennies, it depends on the soil content, but in Michigan, most pennies, you pull them out of the ground, likewise, are in great condition. Now, in certain areas of the ground is too moist or acidic, the pennies can get chewed up, but not that bad. So most coins come out of the ground good. Most jewelry comes out of the ground good. Gold does not get messed up being in the ground. Silver does not, as long as it's decent grade silver. So I've found a lot of coins in good condition, a lot of jewelry in good condition, and even the belt buckle I found was in decent condition. And like I said, the guy who bought it from me said, based on the amount of decay on this, the ground action, it's what convinces me that this thing is in fact real. So that helped me out there. Tim Sullivan, Steve, Finland has a TV tax. You must register your new TV with a state authority when you start watching it. Tax to help public broadcasting. Doesn't surprise me. I think the BBC is the same way, isn't it, in England? And, I'm not sure how much advertising they have on Finland TV, if at all. So the question always is, how do you pay to get the programming on the air? Nowadays, of course, with the advent of the internet and the mosaic of cable TV, as Homer would say in Missionary Impossible, the question is going to become whether over-the-air broadcasting is even necessary. And over-the-air broadcasting is hanging in there stronger than I thought they would at this point in time. But I suspect that the terrestrial television and radio stations are going to go the way of the newspapers and the magazines. They might hang in a little bit longer, but it's going to get to the point where people are going to come home, they have a big screen in their living room and turn it on, and it's going to bring stuff in through the internet, not through the airwaves. So 5153 Flash, I found an 1865 Indian head penny that was in extra fine condition, like it was in a coin holder all that time. Was it in the ground, though? Or was that you found it someplace else? 1865 Indian head, by the way, is very early Indian head. They often called this, I believe it's the year that was called a fatty, a little bit thicker than later Indian heads. And also had a slightly different copper content. JP, can one go metal detecting in a state park? It depends on the state park and it depends on the state. In Michigan, you can only metal detect in state parks, on beaches, and other places that are designated as open for metal detecting. Many of them will actually say you cannot metal detect anywhere else. And I don't blame them for two reasons. One is a lot of our state parks are historic in nature. And number two is a lot of metal detectorists sadly don't fill in their holes and leave trash everywhere and mess places up. So you can't just have people digging everywhere. So I have no problem with that. But most city and public parks in Michigan otherwise are open to detecting. So you can walk into a city park in a downtown area and detect just dig in a way that doesn't hurt the grass, fill in your holes, haul out your garbage, and no one cares. I have literally been metal detecting in a city park and had a police officer walk up to me and say, "How you doing?" I go, "Pretty good. How are you?" And he's good. And I go, "Can I help you?" And he goes, "I'm just watching to make sure you're not damaging the grass." And I go, "Cool." And I detected, I got a signal. I go, "You want to see how I do this?" He goes, "Sure." And I show him how I pinpoint to show where the signal is. I then take out my digger and I go, "Okay." And the way you do it is you know where the signal is right here. And you dig a half circle around it like this, straight down. You take your digging tool and you go straight down and you pull that out. You take your hand and you reach in and you pull the dirt out by hand and you flip it over so that it leaves a hinge in the grass. You get the target out and you flip it back in and you cannot tell it was done. And the guy watched me do that one time. He goes, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And I go, "Cool." And he followed me for 10, 15 minutes. And finally he said, "Well, I got to get back to work now. Bye." And I don't know if he'd been sent over, somebody said, or somebody complained or whatever, but I wasn't harming anything by doing that. So it was pretty cool. Steve, will it find hunters' crack pipes? Well, you'd find anything that's made out of metal. So the Gilded Age Phoenix, find a flying eagle scent and then we're in business. I've never found a flying eagle scent. I've found probably about 100 Indian head pennies, and I've also found 4 large pennies. Now, I've actually had people tell me, "Go, Steve, those are not pennies, those are large cents." And they act all bent out of shape about it. They're called large pennies also. That's what we call them in America. I found 4 large pennies, and I've also found my oldest silver coin, 1837 half dime, which is a 5-cent piece made out of silver, 1837. I also found 1837 seated half dollar, which is pretty cool. There you go. Matt Blanks, his first time catching you live. I was curious if you could explain the politics and law behind how Flint, Michigan happened. When you say Flint, are you referring to the water problems, or are you just talking about the general condition of the city in general? The water situation in Flint is a whole story. I'm sure someone will write a book about it, but I'm not the one who should be writing the book. There's a couple people who would obviously be great people to write the books, including there was one guy who was a water expert at a university outside of Michigan, and he was contacted by somebody who said, "Hey, my drinking water is messed up and no one believes me." And he said, "Well, send me the water sample. I'll take a look at it." And they sent him the sample, and it was so far off the charts, he thought they were messing with him. And long story short, he came to Michigan and took samples himself. And he's like, "This is unbelievable." And it was that chain of events that started the dominoes falling that became the Flint City water problem. And so I've always thought that guy should write a story about it. I don't know if he will or not, but he should. What is with the yellow stuff on the flag, Mr. Smith, referring to the gold fringed flag behind me? In America, we have a flag, the United States of America, and it's got stripes on it. It's got a blue field on it. It's got some stars on it. And whenever it's displayed from a staff indoors, it almost always has a gold fringe around it for display purposes. But if you mount it on the wall, you don't put the fringe on it. And there is a conspiracy theory among sovereign citizens that the gold-fringed flag is actually an admiralty flag, which indicates that the courts in America are not actual courts. They're admiralty courts. And it's this whole cockamamie theory that is so insane that I can't believe anybody buys it, but people do. So I put it there, and it triggers them. So I admit that. I'm trolling the people who tune in who are sovereign citizens. So Chazman says, I don't drink my tap water anymore. It kills plants. Yeah, I don't drink tap water either, only because mine comes out of the ground. I don't know where that ground has been. There you go. Andrew Allen, how believable do you think the detecting is in The Curse of Oak Island? Well, you know, the curse of that show is they keep making them, and I'll admit I watch. And, you know, Gary Drayton, who does the detecting in that show, I have a lot of respect for him, but he's on a show that's actually one step above buffoonery. What they're doing on that show is so far afield from what they started out doing. There's nothing on the island, there never was. But Gary Drayton finds cool stuff in the island. Any place you look, in that day and age, you would find cool stuff. So Gary Drayton's found a bunch of cool stuff on that island that's got nothing to do with the Oak Island money pit. But I like Gary Drayton. He uses a detector by another company I don't care that much about. It's not a White's, but other than that, he's a nice guy, but the show is just goofy. So was 1837 halftime the No Stars variety? I'm not sure. To take a look at that. It was in rough shape. It was very, very worn. It was dropped. I know where I found it. I found it on a sidewalk tear out in an old town in Michigan. So somebody asked about the $100 bill, and then someone else pointed out right where it is. So good evening, everyone. Greetings from Flanders Fields, Belgium. Faudo 13. And of course, Flanders Fields is very, very well known, especially to, I believe, Canadians who lost a lot of boys, as they'd say, in World War I. So Stephen Van Rockel, do you play any musical instruments? No, I do not. Zero. Don't play any. I'm not musical at all. I love music. I love listening to music, but I couldn't play an instrument to save my life. I've got a couple brothers who are musical, including my oldest brother, Ken, plays in a couple bands. He's retired now, and he plays the guitar very, very well. He plays in a blues band that plays once or twice, a month or so, and he plays in a covers band that plays once or twice a month as well. I've gone and seen them both play, and it's great, and he's really, really good. But then again, he's been playing electric guitar his entire life. So, and I've not been. So there you go. Have you ever dealt with a sovereign citizen in court? Kelly Keywert. I have not dealt with one, but I've seen them in court, and it's hilarious. I've seen a guy come into court on a traffic ticket. They call his case, and he tells the judge, take down that flag. I refuse to be heard in a courtroom that's under admiralty law. And the judge just goes, I'm not taking the flag down. How do you plead? And then he pulls out a list of sovereign citizen objections. Every single one, the judge goes, nope, 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 nope. Now, do you want to answer the charges themselves or no? And he raised some stupid argument. Prosecutor made an argument, and this is a civil infraction. So the judge goes, okay, I rule against you. Boom, you lose. And then he started objecting to other things about the courtroom. And everyone in the courtroom was like, oh, God, it's a waste of time. So Fireman Jeff 911, does he build his own guitars from his own trees? It's funny you should ask that, because I have another brother who actually did build electric guitars, handmade electric guitars, and I have one. It's not within reach of me right now, so I'll have to bring it out one of these days, because the sad part is that I own the guitar. I cannot play it. Okay. I can do one chord, and I have it as a memento, but I don't play it. So I do have a guitar that's handmade by a brother of mine, but another story for another day. Ever detect any meteorites, crispy critters? No, I have not, but I know guys who do go searching for them. And that's a whole different thing, because meteorites often have a heavy metal compound in them that makes them detectable by metal detectors. And if you know where they might be found, there's some famous places where we know one hit the ground over here and scattered. And these guys will go out with these really, really big coils and find them. And if you can find an actually identifiable meteorite, they're worth money. But I've never gotten into it. It's a whole different mindset to try to figure that stuff out. Donald Norby, bring out the guitar. I love to see it. It'll have to be next week. It's in another room and it's packed up. Who will be held accountable if an autonomous car runs over someone? Camaro Time asks. Well, the funny thing is that the way laws are right now, you can't put a car on the road without insurance. So if an autonomous car runs somebody over, the owner of the car will be held liable for it the same way they are right now. So hopefully they've got insurance, or insurance is going to cover it, but it's going to be owner liability. The only question is who would get a ticket? Is anybody going to get a criminal ticket, like for speeding or reckless driving? Or what if, let's make up a funny example here. Suppose two autonomous cars go out on the road and decide to drag race. So they're drag racing each other on their own. Now, in Michigan, drag racing is potentially a misdemeanor where you can get 6 months in jail and lose your driver's license and pay a big fine. So if the cops pulled over 2 autonomous cars at drag racing, would anyone get ticketed? Or what do you do? And they're going to have to come up with new definitions for some of these crimes as to what's going to happen if the crime is committed, but there's no one in the car. And presumably somebody is going to be responsible for what happens with the car. And it might simply be that they get written up as if they were in the car. In other words, don't send your car to the store and have it go pick up stuff for you unless you think it can obey the traffic laws. So there you go. A Florida son says, do you speak Finnish? No, I do not. And I apologize. I wish I did, but I don't. Finnish is a very difficult language. My parents both speak it. They did not teach me any of it. So it's sad, but true. I know almost zero Finnish. There you go. Jesse Thornburg points out the audio sounds great. Thank you very much. And I'm glad because it took me some time, but I finally got a setup where I can use a good camera and my good microphone. This is the Electro Voice RE20. I get asked about that from time to time, that I'm using for both my podcasts, my videos, and the live feeds, the good microphone. This is an Electro Voice RE20. Electro Voice is an American microphone company. I suspect they use these worldwide, but in America, these are ubiquitous in radio and TV stations. If you saw the TV show Frasier, he used one in the studio and did a very good job of making that studio look real. And almost every radio station you go to in America uses this microphone. So there you go. Chris Woodhouse, if 2 sovereign citizens got in a wreck, would they use the courts to sue each other? You bet they would. The sovereign citizens start screaming about how the law protects them the second they get in trouble. So, a police officer pulls them over and they say, I don't have to show you driver's license. I don't have to show you anything. And then the second they start getting hauled out, they start screaming about their constitutional rights. If the Constitution protects you, then you got to follow the laws. And the Constitution says that there's laws in the states and blah, 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 blah. And you lose. Okay. So there you go. Ride Gas. Have you been to Helsinki? I have not. I've not been to Finland. I've got friends who've been there, relatives who've been there, but I have never been to Finland myself. I'd love to go. I might go one of these days. I have debates with my friends about how much I can get around without speaking any Finnish. And I've had many people say, you can go there, not a problem, but I'm paranoid. I've been to other countries. I've been to France. I've been to Switzerland. And I feel very, very out of sorts traveling in a country where I do not speak the language. Mike, are you a third generation American? Let's see. I think that's how it works out. My great grandparents came over, all of them. Carl Lind, Rush Limbaugh ruined the RE20 for me. Yeah, but you want something? Rush also had his gold plated. So I believe, at least the few clips I've seen of Rush Limbaugh, he uses an Electro Voice RE20, but his is gold plated. And so I've always thought, well, his is different than mine because I would never tarnish this with gold. To me, it looks beautiful as it is. So there you go. JJ CEO, if you don't speak language, just speak louder. And even better, assume that they're wrong for not speaking your language. So if I go into a store in Finland and they don't understand me, I will simply speak louder and get angry that they don't speak English. So, Tony S., everyone in Finland speaks English. I suspect most of them do. I know that many of them speak Finnish or also, obviously Finnish, but English as well as Swedish. I know that a lot of them speak several languages. It's very common. What is the story with the curling brush and stone? Thank you for noticing. Mark Crater. And of course, there are new additions and subtractions to this behind me at all times. But behind me for the last few videos have been these two, and they are Christmas ornaments. Christmas ornaments. And this is a Canadian curling rock. In case you didn't know, it's got a little label on it right there. And of course, this would be the Canadian curling broom for brooming the ice as the rock curls its way down the ice. And those were gifts from a viewer, which I greatly appreciate. And I mentioned before that I got a bunch of really, really cool stuff. In fact, much of it's still in front of me here. I mentioned this one last week, the Webster's Handy Dictionary from the 1870s. Also, holiday favorite jelly beans in flavors such as eggnog, candy cane, pumpkin pie, cranberry sauce, and hot chocolate. And by the way, I have to tell you, and this, by the way, is making my American friends look a little bad, but the Canadians are really coming through. Because I told you before, JP passed along the Canadian maple syrup. But I also got the maple fudge, or the fudge à la Arabelle. Not sure what that means. I'm guessing maple. But most of these, not the dictionary, but most of these are gifts from Canada. So I, again, thank my neighbors and friends to the north who are very, very generous and make me very, very glad that I do this and give a P.O. box for people to mail stuff to. So, David Swan, I miss the old curling brooms. Yeah, modern technology changes a lot of things. It's always fun to go back and watch old films of what they wore when they played hockey in the 1940s. Or what bobsleds looked like in the 1930s, that kind of thing. So, Jim Adams, do you collect microphones? Most of them behind you do not seem to be broadcast mics. You are correct. In fact, behind me, I would suspect only the big, tall one in the middle is Shure, and the ribbon mic next to it, which looks like a shaver right there. Those are probably the only two that have ever been used as broadcast mics. The big Shure actually would be used a lot also in musical settings. The others are just different general purpose microphones. I like the way they look. The Lollipop, the A-Static right there, is one that a lot of guys recognize. A lot of guys from the CB and the ham radio communities would recognize it. They get asked about that quite a bit. So, Peter Getnard, all you want is free gifts. Is there any other kind? It's funny. People in my life give me gifts for Christmas. And when viewers send me stuff, it's like Christmas, but it's all year round. And I'm sure many of you noticed, although this shirt is not just, it says Suomi on it, but it's actually from Suomi College, which is a school in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan founded by Finns. But many of the shirts I wear on my channel during the week, during my videos, I'd say at least half of them are donated by people who just sent them in. And I've had people, ask me, they say, Steve, I send you a shirt, will you wear it? XXL, of course. So, Gamersing YouTube says, Steve, Chuck Norris speaks every language in English. Yeah. Chuck Norris does lots of things. So, Ricky Dona, do you have a favorite YouTuber? The only one I've really ever mentioned before is Agadmator, the chess guy. I watch a lot of his stuff. I just like his hello everyone. I just like his way of explaining chess. And I've watched other people try to explain chess, and they either do it very, very boring and slow, or they do it at such a high level that it doesn't help you any. And he has a very, very good way of just walking through a game. It doesn't matter if it's grandmasters or anybody, world chess championship, whatever. And he walks through it move by move and just very, very quickly go, here's why I did this. Here's why I did this. Did this. Okay, could have done this. But if you've done this, and just it's paced perfectly. And he's the kind of guy. It's just, if he's explaining something other than chess, I might watch him. It's just fun to hear him explain stuff. I've also been watching quite a few Mark Felton videos. He's a guy who does World War II, anywhere from 8 to 10 minute long videos about little tiny events in World War II or lesser known weaponry type things. Like, was there ever an occasion where a King Tiger ran into a Churchill? And Mark Felton will find the story and narrate the story with appropriate photographs and images. And it's just an interesting guy who does a ton of really, really good research and makes it worthwhile. So I've always liked that. Donald Norby, Agadmator. It's Agadmator, Agadmator. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the name means or anything. His real name is Antonio, but he does that. Steve, would you wear a racist T-shirt? No, I would not. That's I won't wear a shirt that violates the rules of my own channel. So I won't wear one that's racist or insulting or vile or obscene. But if you've got a business that has T-shirts, I got no problem wearing it. Since you're not paying me to wear it, it's got no problem with YouTube. I just wear them. And I've had people send me in ones. I wore one the other day in a video. I think it ran this morning that says, "Remember Milo and Wolfie." And someone just made that for me and sent it to me. And I appreciate that. Similar to the mug behind me that has Milo and Wolfie and me sitting on a dock looking out at the lake. So, would you ever do a couple stories on Vin Wiki? You mean with him or about him or what? I've watched a few of his videos, but I've actually spoken to, and I've mentioned this before. If you have a YouTube channel and you've got the capability to do what I'm doing right now with a decent camera and a decent microphone, we can try to set it up to where we do a joint show together. I would video at my end, you would video at your end. We drop box them to each other, stitch them together, and make a show out of it. And I did that once with Sam Crack. In fact, Sam Crack's a great guy. I love his channel also. And Sam Crack, we did that. He put the video up on his channel because he has more viewers than I do. And that's where a lot of people found my channel from. And I've had one or two people approach me, but unfortunately, most people don't have anything other than the camera that comes built into a laptop, which a camera lens that big is not conducive to shooting something in decent quality. So I'd like to do it where we can do it with the higher quality stuff so it looks good. I don't want to shoot a video where it's really good on one side, bad on the other, or good audio, bad audio. I don't want it to be jumping back and forth. I want it to be consistent all the way through. I recently got an email from a guy who's an attorney in, I think, Pennsylvania, who's got a channel, and he asked me about doing this. I said, if we can hook up the technology, absolutely, I'd love to. I love talking to people, so it makes it easier on me. I got to come up with topics every single day, but if I have a guest, I can park them here and have them talk, make them do the hard part. So I'm still working on that. Have you ever driven in a demolition derby? No, I've not. I've never actually, I take that back. I've seen a demo derby. I've seen them at the Genesee County Fair years ago. One of the radio stations I worked at sponsored one, I believe. Or we either sponsored a car or sponsored the demolition derby, but I remember being in the stands and watching it going, yeah, that looks like that could be fun. So, do a show with Lawful Masses, Leonard. I've watched Leonard. I think I've sent him a note, but I've never gotten a response back. So I don't know if he does that or not. If he does, I'd be happy to talk to him. I know he's got more viewers than I do, so more subscribers. Maybe that's it. You have to understand that there's this pecking order, and so somebody might look at me and go, "Well, why should I have him on my show? All he's trying to do is promote his stuff." But then again, if somebody comes along who's only got 12 subscribers and wants to be on my show, but I guess I don't care. All I'm worried about is the technology. I want it to look good. I can interview somebody and have a good time and talk to anybody about anything. I don't care. I want it to look good, sound good. Please turn over that law book with the cover curling up. Hammond Egger, thanks. You know something? I'm glad you said that. It's been bothering me too, and I keep forgetting. So if I turn it over, it's a little better. There you go. How's that? Did you ever write a song? Did your brother sing it? No. I've got a brother who's another brother who's a musician who's recorded some songs, but I've never sung. Singing and musical instruments are both beyond my pay grade. Fireman Jeff 911 says, I'm the only person I know who has totaled a fire truck. I bet there's a story there. And I saw a video yesterday that was shocking, and you may have seen this too because it was all over the internet, YouTube and Twitter, and also like the Daily Mail. But somebody's dash cam was pointing backwards at the side of the road at an accident scene. I don't know if it was a police cam or what it was. And there was this a highway and a bunch of cars off the side of the road because of an accident. And all of a sudden you see guys running towards the camera because out of the cloud of snow is coming a semi that's lost control. And the semi goes over onto the shoulder, turns sideways, and then and it crushes a police, like a big police SUV. I don't think anybody got killed, but if there'd been anybody in that SUV, they would have died, no question. And it was one of the scariest things you ever saw caught on camera. And it happened either yesterday or the day before. Crazy thing. But I assume the truck driver was going too fast for the conditions, didn't see the stopped cars, and then thought, okay, I can go to the side of the road, and then realized, oh, there's people there too, and then laid it down. And I don't know how much of it was intentional, how much of it was pure accident, and I hope everyone survived. But from the headlines I saw, it looked like it was simply a scary accident, but no one got really hurt. So there you go. Christopher Ritchie, a friend of mine, totaled an ambulance years ago. Volunteer firefighter plowed into the ambulance during an active fire call. That would not surprise me at all. Ernest Prince says that was in Wyoming State. You mean with the truck I just described going out of control? That makes sense. I think it was someplace out west. Nico Pesla says, yeah, that even made the news in Finland. There you go. Ride, gas, fog. Yeah, I wasn't sure it was fog or snow. I just remember that there was something that was obscuring visibility. And every single year, you hear about these pileups. There's a pileup down south a couple days ago, maybe a week ago, 60, 70 car pileup. What happens is that everyone's driving a little too fast for the conditions, but they think we're okay. Somebody at the front loses control, and then people behind them start piling into them. And before it's over, you got a huge multi-car pileup. And it seems to happen 3 or 4 times a year around the country. And, it's a scary situation, but you're driving in those kind of conditions, you got to be careful. So there you go. Jim Bergen, maybe you and Jay Leno could talk about Tucker. Finished your book. Amazed how business can make the government to destroy Tucker's dream. Yeah. It's interesting. I've spoken to Jay Leno about the Chrysler Turbine car because he's got one. I sent him a copy of the Tucker book because he wrote the foreword to the Tucker book. But he does not have a Tucker as of this moment, I don't think. But he's got friends who have them, and he's talked about them on his show before. But I've never talked to him on his show about Tuckers. I'd like to. So one of these days, maybe I will. We'll see. So, hello, Steve. 6 miles west of Gross Eel Free Bridge, J-Pole. Not sure what that's a reference to. See here. Do you do anything with pilots and aviation law? Christopher Ritchie. No, I don't. The FAA regulates pilots and aviation law for the most part. And I know that I know several pilots. A good friend of mine, Dave's a pilot. My brother's a pilot. And I know a little bit more about aviation law, I suspect, than some people, simply because I know pilots. And I'm familiar with it, but I just know that the feds and the FAA are very, very strict on a lot of things to do with pilots because they take the idea of flying an airplane in the airspace quite seriously. But I've never handled any legal issues with pilots or aviation law, other than I mentioned last week that I helped a friend of mine get a drone license back when that was a thing a couple of years ago. But other than that, I haven't dealt much with pilot law. Paul Lemke, I got your turbine car book for Christmas. Hey, Merry Christmas. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Bob Bong, can an airplane be a lemon? Michigan's lemon law does not cover airplanes, and I don't believe any state's laws do. But when you buy something that expensive, I would highly urge you to have it inspected. So my friend Dave, I believe, recently bought an airplane, and he told me he's going to buy an airplane. And most airplanes you buy these days are used and older because there's so many older airplanes that are still out there that you can get that are still airworthy. And I said, the first thing I said, I go, please tell me you had it inspected. He goes, absolutely. And so you pay someone. And that's something that guys who buy high-end boats and airplanes understand, that you're going to pay to have it inspected, and you will pay that cost. You'll have it inspected. And if you decide not to buy it based on the inspection, you didn't lose the money. You saved the money that you didn't blow on the worthless plane, So just get it inspected. That's a key thing. And I've known other guys who've owned airplanes. A dear friend of mine who was an attorney had a dual engine airplane. And he would talk about how expensive it was to keep that thing operational because he had to do such frequent, FAA checks and inspections and logbooks and maintenance. And it was just, you think guys who have boats spend money? You ain't spent money. till you bought an airplane, a multi-engine airplane. So I know that keeping that thing airworthy cost a lot of money. So there you go. Yeah, homie 789, buy new from Boeing and see how it lasts forever sitting on the ground, not allowed to fly. Yeah, that Boeing thing is going to get probably get scarier before it gets better. We have to wait and see how Boeing even does surviving this, because in their business, a couple crashes can do a really, really bad hit on your business. Devil Ants asks, Steve, I've got a heck of a question, brother. Since debtor's prison was outlawed and child support is a civil matter, how can someone be jailed for it and it be legal? And that's actually a question that's been raised by many people around the country, and it's an ongoing debate, because there were debtor's prisons in the old days, in the old countries, right? And in America, if you owe money to somebody, they can't throw you in prison for it anymore, not simply because you owe the money. However, there are situations in some states where a court can say you are required to pay this person money. And if you don't pay the money, you'll be in contempt of court. And now the court shouldn't do that if you're incapable of paying the money, because if you can't pay the money, you can't pay the money. But I've seen it before where a judge said, hey, look, I believe you could have paid the money if you wanted to. You chose not to. Therefore, that choice that you made puts you in contempt of court. So I'm going to jail you for contempt of court because you chose to do this with the money rather than pay the money to the person you owed it to. Now, that's kind of the same thing as debtor's prison, but a little different. But that's how they get around that distinction. But I can tell you that there are some organizations out there like the ACLU and others that are basically saying, look, you can't throw people in jail for, in essence, owing money, because there are other situations, not just child support. I've even heard it before where somebody owed someone some money. They got dragged into court. There's a writ of execution and a payment plan or something, and the person couldn't make the payments, and then they didn't show up for court, and a bench warrant was issued for arrest. The person got arrested, gets dragged into court, gets thrown in jail. And the underlying thing was an unpaid debt, but it still led to someone being in jail. And so how is that different from debtor's prison? Well, procedurally it's different, but really, is it that different? And that's the big argument people have with it. So that's the explanation. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not. I'm an attorney. It's not my job here to apologize for the laws. It's simply my job to tell you what the laws are. And that's the rationale behind it. I'm not saying I agree with it. I personally don't agree with it. I've seen people in court before standing before a judge going, Judge, I'm broke. I can't pay what you're asking me to pay. And it might be a fine. It might be court costs. It might, and I've seen a judge thinking, and the thought process in their head. They're thinking, if this person's telling me the truth, there's nothing I can do. I can't make this person pay money they haven't got. But the judge is also thinking, but what if they're pulling one over on me? I mean, we've all seen, every attorney I know has seen this, where someone came into court and pled guilty for driving on a suspended license and walked out of court, got in their car, and drove away with a suspended license. Every attorney I know has seen it. I've seen it more than once. So every judge thinks the person could be lying to me. They could pay the money if they wanted to, possibly. So do I jail them to teach them a lesson? But if I'm wrong and I jail them and they can't pay the money, what good is it? It's basically debtor's prison. So there you go. We're going to wrap it up now. It's been an hour and a half. Well, an hour and 29 because of the little screw up at the beginning. But we're going to wrap it up today. Thank you for being here. We got over 400 in the room, so that's a good number for me. I thank you. We'll do it again next Sunday, 1 o'clock. Of course, I believe that'll be after the New Year's, so that'll be next year, the first live feed of next year, 1 o'clock on Sunday. I'll talk to you then. Until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.